actually due to, quote, vulnerable plaques, those mild 10 or 20% stenoses which suddenly rupture and progress. And no one's ever really looked at that. No one's ever dissected this curve to see what is causing all these events. So we therefore performed a prospective multi-center natural history study using 3-vessel multimodality intracoronary imaging to quantify the clinical event rate due to atherosclerotic regression and to identify those lesions which place patients at risk for unexpected adverse cardiovascular events. And that was the PROSPECT trial. So what we did was we took 700 patients with acute coronary syndromes, either unstable angina, non-STEMI, or recent STEMI, who underwent angioplasty of 1 or 2 vessels in the coronary tree such that every single severe lesion was treated. The operator had to say, this patient is going to do fine. Unless he restenosis or thrombosis or has an unexpected problem, I'm leaving nothing high grade behind. And we enrolled these patients at 40 sites in Europe and the United States. And once the patient had a successful, uncomplicated angioplasty of the acute coronary syndrome, he was enrolled in PROSPECT. And we did a lot of blood testing, we did a lot of samples for biomarkers that were sent to a core lab, a lot of diabetic testing. But the most important thing that we did was, on top of angiography, we performed 3-vessel intravascular ultrasound and radiofrequency IVUS, or so-called virtual histology. And what we did was we tried to IVUS the proximal 8 centimeters of all 3 coronary arteries, no matter what they looked like, even if they looked normal, even if there was diffuse disease, etc. And radiofrequency IVUS, or virtual histology, is, for those of you, most of you I think in the audience know that, but that's a way to look at not only the dynamic sound wave signal that reflects back from the ultrasound beam, but also the frequency response. And it gives you more information, and it's been correlated with pathologic tissue types, either calcific, fibrotic, fibrofatty, or necrotic core. And our hypothesis is that a vulnerable plaque, in most cases pathologically, is caused by a thin-capped fibroatheroma, or a TICFA. That's pathologically what we see. And we wanted to see if we could see TICFAs using virtual histology, and if so, they predicted problems at the TICFA site. So, in addition to angiography and IVUS, we did virtual histology. And based on those 4 lesion types, remember we've got fibrous, which is dark green, fibrofatty, which is light green, necrotic core, which is red. That's the bad stuff. That's the cholesterol and the cholesterol esters. And then calcium. We could classify lesions into 5 different lesion types. Either fibrotic, which is mostly fibrous tissue, fibrocalcific, which has at least 10% calcium, pathologic intimal thickening, which is thought to be the most common form of atherosclerosis. This is a mixture of fibrofatty and fibrous tissue, so you can see the light yellow and the green. And then there's the so-called fibroatheromas. And fibroatheromas are characterized by at least 10% necrotic core, that's the red stuff. And if there was a green rim on top of the necrotic core, protecting it from the lumen, if you will, that's called a thick-capped fibroatheroma. And if we don't see a green rim, that's called a VH thin-capped fibroatheroma. Now, virtual histology, or IVUS, has a resolution of around 200 microns, and pathologically we think a thin-capped fibroatheroma is 65 microns or less, so we can't really see the thin ones. So what we call, by IVUS or VH, a thin-capped fibroatheroma may also contain some thick ones, but that's a limitation you have to understand. So what we did in PROSPECT was we did QCA in the core angiographic laboratory of every single millimeter of the coronary tree. Okay? So every millimeter, I could tell you, in every vessel, every branch, every twig, anything greater than 1.5 millimeters in diameter. We could tell you the reference vessel diameter, if there was a minimal luminal diameter, the diameter stenosis, if there was a lesion, the length, whether it was an eccentric lesion, concentric, calcified, every single millimeter. It would take 2 technicians 16 hours each to do each film.